This is Thaddeus Terrell, a video presentation 2 for critical thinking, PH 1900. The first question was, how has society produced an empty self? Two reasons I believe that society has produced an empty self, as Moreland has produced in his book, is that we as a society have become very individualistic. He brings about how he went to his daughter's school and how the children began to talk about the DARE program and how he almost dared the other parents that the children would begin to talk about it from a selfish like point of view. And I believe that that's what we have done in our society today. A lot of things that we encounter, a lot of things that we go after, it's more so we're looking at it at a selfish point of view, not thinking really about others and how our our thoughts and our patterns and our habits and the things we do, how they can really affect others simply because we look at it as just affecting ourselves. Um, and as a society, that's very horrible. I mean, we can point all the way from the top to the bottom, being in our circles, whether it be at church, work, the government, politics, anything that we can see, we can always see that others always look for themselves first before you look at others. And that goes against Christianity because we're also supposed to always look out for our brothers rather than having this individualistic point of view of just thinking that it's about us. And that also brings us to point two of that is being narcissistic. We'll be self-infatuated with ourselves, kind of what they call having the big head and having our head swell up, just where everything kind of revolves around us. And that is not the case at all. There's 7 billion people who live in this world, and we are just one out of the 7 billion. So we can't assume that everything has to revolve around just one particular person. As well, we see this from top to bottom as well. Government and politics. We see certain leaders who think of it all about them. I know the past presidential debate with Trump and Hillary, both of them really spoke about themselves and concerning themselves, not really thinking about the nation as a whole. And we just seen both of those two badgering each other and kind of bringing down each other's character for the sake of themselves, not thinking about the nation that they would be serving. And this is not well because we look at it just from their point of view, and it seems to be that it's all about them, and it's not all about them. A question two was, how does the empty self threaten the mission of the church? Being an empty self, being individual, being narcissistic. With doing that, we cannot be a follower of Christ if we are living in our empty selves. It says in his book that living this type of way is the enemy of Christ, as everything is supposed to be about him and not about us. If we focus only on ourselves and not putting Christ at the forefront of everything, then where are we? We are simply failed as an individual. We are simply failed as a community, as a church, and as a whole, simply because we focus on us and not on others. And as a follower of Christ, this has impacted the church a lot. As I see, being an interim pastor at a church and seeing how it just kind of surrounds others, and a lot of people will tend to forget that Christ is supposed to be at the head. He's the forefront. Then everything else follows. But if we do not have Christ at the forefront, if he's not leading, then we are just simply going off of our own agenda and our own plans and kind of pushing Christ and pushing what the church was supposed to do aside. The mission of the church, we're just pushing it aside. Question three was, how can the local church minister to people who exhibit these qualities? For one, I know we can minister to these groups simply by teaching love. I believe that love is the forefront and the most powerful principle in the Bible. We see that Christ even talks about this commandment of love first, How can we combat this? We first have to love God with all of our mind, soul, and strength, and our hearts as well. But then secondly, he said you must love each other as you love yourself. And if you loving yourself, then you're loving yourself the way you're supposed to love yourself, then obviously you can be able to love your brothers the way you're supposed to love them. And that's what love is all about, not just loving yourself, but showing that love to someone else. And if we can do that, I believe that we can get back to where it is that God wants us to be, and not having to worry about having an empty self. And we can simply go off that by looking at the virtues that were exhibited in chapter 5, which talks about seeking truth and honesty. If we're honest and open with ourselves, and if we're believing in the truth, and the saving power of Jesus Christ and the love that he's shown for us on Calvary's cross, if we can exhibit that power and understand that power and that truth, I believe that we can kind of continue to go on and do what is right in the eyes of the Lord. And also, another virtue was trust. And with trust also combats with hope. And if you have trust, you have hope in something. And I believe if we begin to be open, trusting one another, believing one another, and holding each other accountable, I believe that we can continue to run this race that we have been chosen to run. And that's all I have for today.